The cliches of socialism have not changed in hundreds of years, certainly not in the past 50 years. Why that's important for you, I'll talk about on the Gary DeMar Show today. Last week I put up a little article talking about Obama's commencement speech at the University of Michigan and some of the severe blunders he made in that talk, which were of course passed over by the media. There was absolutely no criticism in the media at all. Obviously, of course, it has to do with the way the minds of people today are indoctrinated into socialistic thinking, into thinking that we are a democracy and things of that nature. And so I put this article out exposing some of the nonsense that he said. In the process of one speech, he referred to our nation as a democracy or democratic at least 16 times. This came despite, of course, the fact that he even told the story, whether it's apocryphal or not, of Benjamin Franklin as he came out of the Constitutional Convention. Some woman allegedly asked him, well, doctor, what have you given us? And Franklin answered, a republic if you can keep it. Whether that's true or not, it's obviously a great story. Immediately after that, Obama goes on to start talking about our democracy and says, yes, we have kept it. We have kept our democracy. And then he talks about democracy through the entire thing and challenges these young students graduating from the University of Michigan that the question for their lifetimes is this: how will you keep our democracy going? Of course, that's all nonsense. If you search the Founding Fathers, and he was even quoting the Founding Fathers in here, Jefferson and others, you will see that they deplored democracy. They despised democracy. Jefferson reportedly said that a democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people can take away the rights of 49% of the people, and of course that's exactly what the socialists like. Several months ago, I came across a book going through some boxes here at American Vision entitled Cliches of Socialism. And I began to flip through this and I realized it was a series of very short articles. Few of them are more than a couple pages long. And it was published by the Foundation for Economic Education back in 1962, actually revised in 1970, but not very much. And I said, you know what, these things are so relevant today. Each one of these little cliches like the Constitution was invented for a different era, we need new laws for today, and things like that. All through here. And I realized these are all relevant today, all relevant to the things that the socialists and the liberals are trying to do in our government today. And I said, this should be reprinted. And of course, there were no copyrights in this, and I was allowed to reprint it easily. And so American Vision came out with How to Argue with a Liberal and Win. It's the same book, retitled, repackaged, retypeset, and all of the facts and figures that pertain to 40, 50 years ago have been updated to reflect modern statistics. And so this is a very helpful guide. And the reason I bring this up in connection with Obama's speech is because just going through this speech that he gave in the span of about 45 minutes to an hour, I found at least a half dozen or more of these very cliches that have been used for decades in order to push socialism onto unsuspecting people and certainly onto indoctrinated students at universities and public schools. What are some of these cliches? I just want to run through them briefly and show you how relevant this little book is today and why it makes a valuable resource for young people today who are in these situations, who are in these schools, who are faced with the forces and the pressures from people who are their professors and who are their presidents, trying to ram this kind of thinking down their throats as if it were normal. One space in his talk, Obama says that our economy has shifted focus from agriculture to industry to information and technology. And we have argued and struggled at each and every juncture over the best way to ensure that all of our citizens have a shot at opportunity. A little bit lower, he makes the same argument essentially, that when we transitioned from an economy based on farms to one based on factories, workers needed new skills and training. His argument is, of course, the government was there to help, and the nation set up a system of public schools. He makes the related argument later. He says, the truth is, the debate we've had for decades between more government and less government doesn't really fit the times in which we live. Well, that sentiment is addressed in at least 3 of the short chapters in this very book. And keep in mind, this is 50 years ago. The exact same arguments were being used. Chapter 1, the more complex the society, the more government control we need. That myth is debunked. Chapter 7, why the free market system would take us back to the horse and buggy. In other words, that belongs to the agricultural era, doesn't work today. That myth is debunked. Chapter 25, the United States Constitution was designed for an agrarian society. In other words, we need better laws today. We need smarter government today. Exact same arguments being used over and over and over. In one place, Obama goes on to say that we need to update the government to the times in which we live. In other words, we can balance our liberties that are talked about in the Constitution while at the same time adapting to the needs of society, aka bailouts and handouts and that sort of socialist scheme. There's a chapter in here called Federal Aid is All Right if it doesn't bring federal control. And of course that's ludicrous. You can't have the one without the other. It's very interesting how relevant these chapters are to the very things that are being said in the public today to advance these causes. Very, very interesting. One chapter says, we have learned to counteract and thus avoid any serious depression. While praising the past socialist schemes in our nation, Obama said that our government, after the Great Depression, put in place a set of rules and safeguards to make sure that such a crisis never happened again. And of course, it did happen again, so that shows you how good the government rules and regulations are. Obama quotes President Lincoln, who said the role of government is to do for the people what they cannot do better for themselves. And that's nonsense. It's unconstitutional. Chapter 3 in the book, the government should do for the people what the people are unable to do for themselves. The exact same cliche, myth, if you will, busted. In another part in his talk, Obama is talking about, for when government is spoken of as some menacing, threatening foreign entity, it conveniently ignores the fact in our democracy, again, government is us. And of course, that myth is debunked in this book as well. The government is all of us. Again, 1962, the same argument. We, the people, hold in our hands the power to choose our leaders, to change our laws, and shape our own destiny. Again, chapter 75, under public ownership, we, the people, own it. This is all nonsense. We, the people, don't own it. The government owns what is publicly owned, and we have very little say, if any. Another interesting part is Obama gets mad at people who are calling his government socialist, and he says we should stop using the word socialism after, of course, he's praised all the great socialist schemes in American history, like Social Security and the great railroad movements and all that kind of stuff. But he gets mad at those who are arguing against him, calling it socialism. And he says, rather, we need to hear both sides of the argument. And he says this, the practice of listening to opposing views is essential for effective citizenship. Very interesting. Chapter 22 in the book, we believe in presenting both sides. That myth debunked. It's not that we don't want to listen to opposing views, but rather that when one view is discredited, we cast it aside and move on and stand up for our rights and liberties. He says, furthermore, all arguments and all doubts and all the cynicism that's out there today, we should never forget that as Americans, we enjoy more freedoms and opportunities than citizens in any other nation on earth. Chapter 32 is the myth that we never had it so good under the socialist programs that we have today. One more to finish out here. Near the end of his speech, Obama says, this is what makes us different. This is what makes us American. Our ability, at the end of the day, to look past all of the differences and all of our disagreements and still forge a common future. Chapter 9, man is born for cooperation, not for competition, which of course is the premise of the free market. And by the way, how does that make us distinctly American? Every nation on earth can say that. We can look past our disagreements and forge a common future. So this is all nonsense. Same old cliches that have been voiced all through American history. Decades and decades, Obama is nothing new, and we need to arm ourselves with books like this in order to know it.
For more related to this topic, check out How to Argue with a Liberal and Win, edited by Joel McDurmon. You will find it at AmericanVision.com.